Victorian England, 1847. The gardens of Thornfield Manor bloomed with exceptional vigour that spring, as if nature itself rebelled against the gloom that had settled over the grand estate since the late Earl of Ashworth's passing. Amid the vibrant roses and delicate lilies sat Lady Beatrice Ashworth, her golden hair catching the afternoon sunlight, a well-worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets resting in her lap. At 20 years of age, Beatrice had grown accustomed to solitude. The servants whispered that she possessed the ethereal beauty of her late mother, the Earl's first wife, with eyes the colour of summer skies and a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Yet such beauty, rather than being celebrated, had become her curse. "Beatrice, what are you doing outside where anyone might see you?" The sharp voice cut through the garden's tranquillity. Countess Viola Ashworth approached with hurried steps, her fashionable walking dress rustling dramatically against the gravel path. At 37, the widow maintained her striking appearance through rigorous attention to the latest beauty treatments and fashions. Beatrice closed her book and rose to her feet. "Stepmother, I was merely reading. The doctor suggested fresh air would help with your supposed headaches." "Yes." Viola's lips formed a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "How convenient that you suddenly feel well enough to sit outside precisely when we are expecting visitors." "Visitors? I wasn't aware." "Of course you weren't. Why would you be?" Viola adjusted her perfectly positioned hat. "Lord Huntington and his son are coming to discuss business matters. Cordelia will be joining us for tea afterward." Her voice softened at the mention of her daughter. "You will remain in your chambers, as usual. We'll say you're indisposed." Beatrice had heard these words so many times they had lost their sting. After her father's death 3 years prior, her stepmother had systematically removed her from society's view. Invitations mysteriously disappeared, gowns were ruined before important events, and rumours of Beatrice's delicate constitution spread throughout London's elite circles. The vibrant young woman who once shone at social gatherings had become little more than a ghost in her own home. "As you wish, stepmother." Beatrice gathered her book and shawl, heading toward the east wing where her chambers were strategically positioned, far from the Manor's entertaining spaces. "And Beatrice," Viola called after her, "do make sure to lock your door. We wouldn't want you wandering about and startling our guests." Inside the Manor, 18-year-old Cordelia Ashworth sat at her dressing table while her lady's maid arranged her dark curls in the latest fashion. Unlike her mother, Cordelia harboured genuine affection for her half-sister. "Is Mother sending Beatrice away again?" she asked, watching her maid's reflection in the mirror. "I'm afraid so, Miss Cordelia," the maid replied. "The Countess has given strict instructions." Cordelia sighed. "It's terribly unfair. Beatrice is the kindest soul in this house, yet Mother treats her as though she were a scandal waiting to happen. Your mother is focused on securing your future, miss, by parading me before every eligible bachelor, while keeping my sister locked away." Cordelia frowned. "I love Mother dearly, but her treatment of Beatrice is unconscionable." Later that afternoon, as Cordelia joined her mother in the drawing room to receive their guests, an unexpected carriage arrived at Thornfield Manor. The butler's usually stoic expression gave way to visible surprise as he hurried to inform the Countess. "Your Ladyship," he announced with a formal bow, "the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, has arrived and requests an audience." Viola nearly dropped her teacup. "The Duke? Here? Now?" She quickly composed herself, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her dress. "Cordelia, sit up straight. Remember everything we practiced." Turning to the butler, she added with forced calm, "Show His Grace in immediately." The Duke of Wellington, at 32 years of age, was indisputably the most eligible bachelor in England. Tall and commanding, with raven-black hair and penetrating grey eyes, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew his worth, yet remained untouched by arrogance. Despite his title and vast fortune, Arthur Wellesley had developed a reputation for being remarkably discerning in his social engagements and utterly immune to the matchmaking schemes of London's most determined mothers. "Countess Ashworth," he greeted with a formal bow as he entered the drawing room. "Miss Ashworth, I apologize for the unexpected nature of my visit." Viola practically glowed with excitement. "Your Grace, what a delightful surprise. We are honored by your presence. Please do join us for tea." As the Duke took his seat, he glanced around the elegantly appointed room. I was passing through the area on my way to my country estate and thought I might pay my respects. I understand Thornfield Manor has exceptional gardens. My late mother was quite fond of horticulture." "The gardens are Thornfield's pride, Your Grace," Viola replied eagerly. "Perhaps Cordelia could show you around. She has quite the eye for botanical beauty." Cordelia, however, had been watching the Duke carefully. She had noticed how his gaze had drifted toward the window overlooking the east garden, where, despite her mother's instructions, Beatrice had returned to her reading spot, visible from this particular angle. "Mother?" Cordelia interjected with innocent eyes. "Didn't you say the east garden was being replanted? Perhaps we should show His Grace the rose garden instead." Viola's smile remained fixed, but her eyes darted to the window. Her face paled when she spotted Beatrice outside. Before she could redirect the conversation, the Duke spoke. "Who is that young lady in the garden? I don't believe we've been introduced." The silence that followed was deafening. Viola's mind raced for an explanation, but Cordelia spoke first. "That's my sister, Your Grace, Lady Beatrice Ashworth." "Half-sister," Viola corrected quickly. "From my husband's first marriage. She's rarely seen in society due to her delicate health." The Duke's expression remained unreadable, but his interest was unmistakable. "She appears to be enjoying Shakespeare in the garden, hardly the activity of an invalid." "Oh, she has good days and bad," Viola explained hastily. "Today must be particularly good." "Then I insist on making her acquaintance while she's feeling well," the Duke stated, rising from his seat. "After all, it would be remiss of me to visit Thornfield and not meet all members of the Ashworth family." And with those words, the carefully constructed barriers Viola had built around Beatrice began to crumble. As Arthur walked toward the garden, Cordelia caught her mother's murderous glare and suppressed a smile behind her teacup. The game had only just begun. The Duke of Wellington strode across the manicured lawn with purpose, leaving a flustered Countess Viola and an amused Cordelia in his wake. Years of navigating treacherous diplomatic waters had honed his instincts for deception, and something about the Countess's behavior had triggered those senses acutely. Beatrice remained unaware of his approach, completely absorbed in her reading. A gentle breeze carried the scent of roses and disturbed a golden strand of her hair, which she absently tucked behind her ear. It was this unguarded, natural gesture that caught the Duke's attention, so unlike the calculated movements of society ladies who performed even their breathing for an audience. "Shakespeare's sonnets," he remarked, stopping a respectful distance away. "An excellent choice for a spring afternoon." Startled, Beatrice looked up, her eyes widening as she took in the imposing figure before her. She quickly rose to her feet, nearly dropping her book in the process. "Your Grace," she curtsied deeply, recognizing him instantly from the portraits that graced many fashionable drawing rooms. "Forgive me. I wasn't aware we had visitors." Something in her apology, the genuine surprise rather than feigned modesty, intrigued him further. "The fault is entirely mine, Lady Beatrice. I arrived unannounced and then compounded my rudeness by interrupting your reading." He bowed slightly. "Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, at your service." "It's an honor, Your Grace, though I fear I'm not properly dressed to receive such distinguished company." Beatrice glanced down at her simple day dress, lovely but far less elaborate than what she would have worn for a formal visit. "On the contrary, I find your appearance perfectly suitable for enjoying literature in one's own garden." His eyes held a glimmer of amusement. "May I ask which sonnet has captured your attention today?" Beatrice hesitated only briefly before answering. "Sonnet 116, Your Grace. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds," he continued the verse, his deep voice giving the words new dimension, "or bends with the remover to remove." Her surprise at his knowledge was evident, and he smiled. "Cambridge education. Some things remain with us, despite our best efforts to forget the tedium of study. I hardly find Shakespeare tedious, Your Grace." "Nor do I, Lady Beatrice." It was the professor's droning interpretations that tested one's endurance. He gestured to the stone bench. "May I join you? I've developed a particular interest in gardens since inheriting my estate." Inside the manor, Viola watched through the window with mounting horror. "This cannot be happening," she muttered, clutching her handkerchief so tightly her knuckles whitened. 3 years of careful planning undone in moments. "Mother, you look positively ill." Cordelia observed with mock concern. "Perhaps you should sit down." "How can I sit when your half-sister is out there monopolizing the Duke's attention? In that plain dress with her hair barely arranged." Viola paced frantically. "We must interrupt them. Send a servant with refreshments or interrupt the Duke of Wellington during a private conversation? That would hardly be proper, Mother." Cordelia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, Beatrice looks rather charming in her simplicity, doesn't she? So natural and unaffected." Viola shot her daughter a suspicious glance. "You've never shown such enthusiasm for your sister's social prospects before." "Perhaps I've grown tired of watching her hidden away like some family secret," Cordelia replied, her expression suddenly serious. "Father would never have allowed it." The mention of her late husband silenced Viola temporarily. Earl Ashworth had doted on both his daughters equally, something Viola had resented from the beginning of their marriage. After his death, restoring what she considered the natural order had been almost too easy. In the garden, Beatrice found herself engaged in the most stimulating conversation she'd had in years. The Duke was not only knowledgeable about literature, but possessed a dry wit that frequently drew genuine laughter from her lips, a sound the gardens of Thornfield Manor had rarely heard since her father's passing. "Lady Beatrice, forgive my directness, but I must confess my surprise," the Duke said after they had discussed everything from Shakespeare to the botanical merits of different rose varieties. "I've attended countless London seasons, yet I cannot recall ever making your acquaintance." A shadow crossed her features. "I haven't participated in recent seasons, Your Grace. My health has been somewhat unpredictable." "Indeed. You appear remarkably well at present." His grey eyes studied her with unconcealed interest. "Good days and bad, as my stepmother says," Beatrice replied carefully, aware that explaining further might appear as criticism of her family, something her father had taught her was never appropriate outside the privacy of one's home. "I see." The Duke's tone suggested he saw far more than she had explicitly stated. "And your good days coincide precisely with the absence of social invitations, I presume?" Beatrice looked away, uncomfortable with the accuracy of his assessment. The Duke sensed her discomfort and changed tactics. "Forgive me. I've developed an unfortunate habit of speaking my mind. A diplomatic disaster, my advisers frequently remind me. There's nothing to forgive, Your Grace. Directness can be refreshing." She offered a small smile, appreciating his perception while maintaining her dignity. Their conversation was eventually interrupted by the arrival of a servant announcing that tea would be served on the terrace. The Duke offered his arm to escort Beatrice, an act that would not go unnoticed by the watching Countess. As they walked toward the terrace, Arthur lowered his voice. "Lady Beatrice, would you permit me to call on you properly tomorrow? I find myself with business in the area that may delay my journey home." Beatrice's heart fluttered treacherously. That would be lovely, Your Grace, though I suspect my stepmother might have other plans." "Excellent. Then I shall be sure to mention it in front of the Countess." His smile held a conspiratorial edge that both thrilled and alarmed her. After all, how could she possibly object to a duke calling on her stepdaughter? What followed was a masterclass in social maneuvering. Upon reaching the terrace, the Duke loudly proclaimed his delight at discovering Lady Beatrice's excellent taste in literature, and announced his intention to call again the following afternoon, specifically to loan her several volumes from his private library. Viola's expression cycled through shock, dismay, and finally forced pleasure with such rapidity that Cordelia had to disguise her laughter as a coughing fit. The Countess found herself trapped in an impossible position, unable to refuse the Duke's request without appearing unconscionably rude, yet furious at the prospect of Beatrice receiving such distinguished attention. "How thoughtful of you, Your Grace," Viola managed through clenched teeth. "Though I fear Beatrice's health is quite unpredictable. Perhaps Cordelia could—" "I insist, Countess," the Duke interrupted smoothly. "Lady Beatrice has impressed me with her literary knowledge, and I rarely encounter such genuine appreciation for the classics. It would be my pleasure to foster such commendable intellectual pursuits." When the Duke finally took his leave, the atmosphere at Thornfield Manor turned glacial. Viola waited only until his carriage had disappeared down the long drive before turning on her stepdaughter. "What did you say to him?" she demanded, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "What scheme have you concocted?" "None, stepmother," Beatrice answered honestly. His Grace approached me in the garden. I could hardly refuse to speak with him. You were supposed to remain in your chambers. I needed fresh air. The doctor said, I care nothing for what the doctor said, Viola snapped. You deliberately placed yourself in the Duke's path, knowing he was visiting today. Mother, Cordelia interjected, Beatrice couldn't have known. You told her Lord Huntington was coming, not the Duke. Viola whirled on her daughter. You stay out of this, Cordelia. I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to see everything ruined now. Ruined? Beatrice echoed, confusion evident in her voice. Surely having the Duke of Wellington call on our family brings honour to Thornfield, regardless of which of us he speaks with. For a moment, Viola seemed on the verge of revealing more than she intended. She composed herself with visible effort. You know nothing of society or its expectations. The Duke's interest is merely a passing curiosity, nothing more. Tomorrow you will develop a severe headache that prevents you from receiving visitors. Is that understood? Beatrice lowered her eyes, the brief joy of the afternoon fading. Yes, stepmother. Good. Now return to your chambers and remain there for the rest of the day. I must think. As Beatrice left the terrace, Cordelia watched her mother with growing concern. For the first time, she wondered if her mother's fixation on controlling Beatrice went beyond mere jealousy. There was something desperate in Viola's eyes, something that hinted at deeper secrets yet to be revealed. Later that evening, a most unexpected visitor arrived at Beatrice's chambers. Cordelia slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. Beatrice, are you awake? Cordelia, what are you doing here so late? Beatrice set aside her book and moved to light an additional candle. I've come with a confession and a proposition, Cordelia said, settling onto the window seat. First, I must tell you that I've been a terrible sister, allowing Mother to treat you so shabbily all these years. You've always been kind to me, Beatrice protested. Kind, perhaps, but not brave. Cordelia's expression was determined. That changes now. Tomorrow you will meet with the Duke, regardless of what Mother says. But how? She's already ordered me to feign illness. A mischievous smile spread across Cordelia's face. Leave that to me. Mother has arranged to meet with the vicar in the village tomorrow afternoon. Something about charitable contributions to appear more pious before society. She'll be gone for at least 2 hours. She'll have the servants watching me. Most of them are more loyal to Father's memory, and to you, than to Mother. Haven't you noticed how they conveniently forget to report your garden excursions? Beatrice considered this revelation. Even if I do meet with the Duke tomorrow, what then? One afternoon changes nothing. Once he returns to London, everything will revert to how it was. Perhaps. Cordelia took her half-sister's hands. Or perhaps not. The Duke seemed genuinely taken with you, Beatrice. In all the seasons I've observed him, I've never seen him show such interest in anyone. We merely discussed books and gardens. And yet he's returning tomorrow, specifically to see you. Cordelia squeezed Beatrice's hands. Promise me you'll at least try, for Father's sake, if not your own. After a long moment, Beatrice nodded. Very well, for Father. What neither sister knew was that in his carriage returning to the local inn, the Duke of Wellington was penning a letter to his most trusted friend, requesting an immediate and thorough investigation into the late Earl of Ashworth's will and the current financial state of Thornfield Manor. Something about the Countess's desperate manoeuvres had awakened his suspicions, and Arthur Wellesley had never been a man to ignore his instincts. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of Thornfield Manor and forever alter the lives of those who dwelled within its walls. The following morning dawned bright and clear, as if the heavens themselves approved of the day's coming events. Beatrice woke early, her mind cycling between hope and trepidation. By the time her lady's maid arrived with breakfast, she had already changed her mind a dozen times about whether to proceed with Cordelia's plan. "Good morning, my lady," the maid Eleanor greeted her with a knowing smile. "Miss Cordelia asked me to help prepare you for your visitor today." Beatrice looked up in surprise. "She told you?" "Indeed, my lady, and I must say, it's about time someone stood up to the Countess." Eleanor set down the breakfast tray and moved to open the wardrobe. "I've taken the liberty of pressing your blue silk gown, the one with the lace trim that belonged to your mother. We've kept it hidden from her ladyship these past years." "Eleanor, you didn't." "I most certainly did, with help from Mrs. Bennet in the laundry. The Countess may rule above stairs, but below stairs, your father's memory and your kind heart command far more loyalty." She laid out the gown reverently. "Your mother wore this the night she first danced with your father. It seems appropriate for today." Tears pricked Beatrice's eyes. "I had no idea you all felt this way. We've watched you fade like a flower without sunlight, my lady. Not one of us below stairs has approved of your treatment." Eleanor's expression grew serious. "Now, eat your breakfast. We have much to do if you're to be ready when the Duke arrives." Meanwhile, in another wing of the manor, Cordelia was executing her part of the plan. She entered her mother's chambers with a concerned expression. "Mother, have you seen the state of the blue drawing room? The one the Duke is likely to be received in today? The curtains are positively dusty, and someone has arranged those hideous dried flowers on the mantel." Viola, who had been examining her complexion in the mirror, turned with alarm. "Impossible! I gave explicit instructions for that room to be perfect." She rose immediately. "Show me at once." Cordelia led her mother through the house, strategically avoiding Beatrice's chambers, where Eleanor was already working her magic. In the blue drawing room, which was in fact impeccably clean, Cordelia manufactured a series of increasingly concerning discoveries that sent her mother into a frenzy of replanning and redecorating, effectively consuming the morning hours that might otherwise have been spent monitoring Beatrice. By noon, Viola was finally satisfied with the drawing room's preparation. "Now I must change for my meeting with the vicar," she announced. "When the Duke arrives, make my excuses. Express my deepest regrets that an urgent charitable matter called me away. Inform His Grace that you will entertain him until my return." "Of course, Mother." Cordelia nodded obediently. "And what of Beatrice's illness?" "I've already instructed the butler to inform His Grace that Lady Beatrice is indisposed and confined to her bed." Viola adjusted her hat with satisfaction. "He'll soon forget this passing fancy when presented with your superior charms and accomplishments." "As you say, Mother." Cordelia fought to keep her expression neutral. "Though it seems a shame to disappoint a duke. Better a small disappointment now than encouraging false hopes." Viola's tone hardened. "Your sister is not meant for society, Cordelia. The sooner she accepts that, the happier she'll be." Once Viola had departed for the village, Thornfield Manor seemed to exhale collectively. Servants moved more freely, conversations grew less guarded, and a subtle current of anticipation flowed through the ancient halls. In her chambers, Beatrice barely recognized her reflection. Eleanor had arranged her golden hair in an elegant style that framed her face perfectly, securing it with her mother's pearl combs. The blue silk gown, updated slightly to suit current fashion while preserving its original beauty, transformed her from the shadow she had become into the lady she was born to be. "There," Eleanor said, stepping back to admire her work. "A true earl's daughter." A soft knock announced Cordelia's arrival. She entered and stopped in her tracks, momentarily speechless. "Beatrice," she finally whispered, "you look magnificent." "Is it too much? Perhaps a simpler gown would—" "It's perfect," Cordelia insisted, crossing the room to take her sister's hands. "You look exactly as you should have been allowed to look all these years." A commotion from below stairs interrupted them. "He's here," Cordelia said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Are you ready?" Beatrice took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, Mother won't return for at least 2 hours. The butler knows to show the Duke to the garden terrace rather than the drawing room. I've arranged everything." Cordelia squeezed her sister's hands. "Now go. Your Duke awaits." "He's hardly my Duke," Beatrice protested, but couldn't suppress a smile. The Duke of Wellington had arrived at Thornfield Manor precisely at the appointed hour, carrying several leather-bound volumes as promised. He'd been mildly surprised when informed that both the Countess and Lady Beatrice were unavailable, the former due to charitable obligations, the latter supposedly bedridden with illness. "How unfortunate," he'd remarked to the butler, his tone carefully neutral. "And Miss Cordelia. Miss Cordelia suggests that perhaps your Grace might enjoy refreshment on the garden terrace while awaiting her company," the butler replied with perfect decorum, though the Duke didn't miss the subtle emphasis on suggests rather than requests. "The garden terrace would be most agreeable," the Duke concurred, suspecting there was more at play than initially apparent. He'd been seated for only a few minutes, admiring the view of the rose garden, when the sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. Arthur rose, expecting to see Cordelia, but instead found himself momentarily speechless at the vision before him. Beatrice Ashworth, far from being bedridden, stood in the terrace doorway transformed. The simple girl from the garden had blossomed into an undeniable beauty, her blue silk gown complementing her eyes and fair colouring to perfection. "Lady Beatrice," he finally said, recovering his composure, "I was informed you were unwell today. A misunderstanding, Your Grace." Her voice held a new confidence, though a blush coloured her cheeks. "I find myself in excellent health this afternoon." "Miraculous," he commented dryly, the corner of his mouth lifting in amusement. "Shall we attribute your recovery to divine intervention, or merely to the temporary absence of the Countess?" Beatrice's eyes widened, and then, to his delight, she laughed, a genuine musical sound. "You are remarkably direct, Your Grace." "Arthur?" he corrected, stepping forward to offer his arm. "When conspiring against overbearing stepmothers, I believe first names are more appropriate, don't you think?" She hesitated only briefly before placing her hand on his offered arm. "Beatrice, then. Though I'm not certain conspiring is the right word. No? What would you call this delightful subterfuge that has managed to resurrect you from your sickbed and conveniently coincide with your stepmother's absence?" "A temporary rebellion," she admitted, as he guided her to the stone bench where they'd sat the day before. "Orchestrated largely by my sister, I must confess. Miss Cordelia has risen considerably in my esteem, then." Arthur sat beside her, maintaining a proper distance while still creating an atmosphere of intimacy. "I brought the books I promised." He indicated the volumes on the table. "First editions of Byron, Keats, and Mrs. Shelley's Frankenstein, though the latter may be too macabre for your taste." "On the contrary," Beatrice replied, her eyes lighting up as she carefully examined the volumes. "I find Mrs. Shelley's exploration of creation and responsibility fascinating, if somewhat disturbing. A lady who appreciates both Shakespeare and Gothic literature. You grow more intriguing by the moment, Beatrice." Their conversation flowed effortlessly from literature to philosophy, to art and music. Arthur found himself increasingly captivated, not just by her beauty, which was considerable, but by her mind. Despite years of isolation, Beatrice had educated herself through her father's extensive library, developing opinions that were both thoughtful and refreshingly free from society's usual constraints. "You must think me terribly provincial," she said, after expressing a particularly unconventional view on women's education. "I've had few opportunities to test my ideas in proper company." "Provincial? Quite the opposite." Arthur leaned slightly closer. "Do you know what I find at most London gatherings, Beatrice? Carefully rehearsed opinions, repeated verbatim from whatever publication is currently fashionable. Your thoughts are your own. That makes them infinitely more valuable." Their tête-à-tête might have continued indefinitely had Cordelia not appeared, slightly breathless, with urgent news. "Beatrice, Mother's carriage has been spotted on the road. She'll be here within 15 minutes. She nodded respectfully to the Duke. "For your Grace, forgive the interruption." Arthur rose immediately, understanding the situation. "No forgiveness necessary, Miss Cordelia. I appreciate your vigilance." He turned to Beatrice, who had paled slightly at the news. "I believe this is where our temporary rebellion must end, for today at least." "Yes," Beatrice agreed, rising from her seat. "I should return to my chambers before she arrives." Something in her resignation stirred a protective instinct in the Duke. "This secrecy and pretense, it cannot continue indefinitely, Beatrice." "It's been my reality for 3 years, Your Grace," she replied softly. "One pleasant afternoon doesn't change that." "Doesn't it?" He took her hand, his expression serious. "What if I told you I have no intention of allowing you to disappear again, that I find myself inexplicably determined to see you properly introduced to society, to see you shine as you were meant to?" Cordelia, watching this exchange with wide eyes, interrupted again. 12 minutes, Beatrice." "Go," Arthur said, releasing her hand. "But no, this isn't the end. I'll call again tomorrow, and the Countess will receive me, and you will be present, illness notwithstanding." As Beatrice hurried back to her chambers, her mind whirling with emotions she scarcely dared name, the Duke turned to Cordelia. "Miss Cordelia, I believe you and I should have a conversation about your sister's situation. There's more happening here than a stepmother's jealousy, isn't there?" Cordelia hesitated, loyalty to her family warring with concern for Beatrice. Your Grace, I have resources and influence that could help her, Arthur pressed. But I need to understand what we're truly facing. After a moment's deliberation, Cordelia nodded. Very well, Your Grace, but not here. Mother has eyes and ears everywhere. My carriage is at the front. Suggest a short drive to show me the local countryside, entirely proper with your groom as escort. We can speak freely there. By the time Countess Viola returned from her meeting with the vicar, the Duke's carriage was just returning from its brief excursion with Cordelia. The Countess, initially furious to find the Duke at Thornfield in her absence, was somewhat appeased to discover he had spent his time with her daughter rather than her stepdaughter. Your Grace, she greeted him with practiced charm. How kind of you to entertain Cordelia in my absence. I hope she hasn't exhausted you with her chatter. On the contrary, Countess, Miss Cordelia has been most enlightening company. There was something in his tone, a subtle edge, that made Viola's smile falter momentarily. In fact, our conversation has convinced me to extend my stay in the area. I find Thornfield and its surroundings quite fascinating. How wonderful, Viola replied, though her eyes had narrowed slightly. You must join us for dinner tomorrow evening. A small gathering. Just family, of course. I would be delighted, the Duke accepted smoothly. And I insist that Lady Beatrice join us. I've brought several books that might interest her, and her absence today was most disappointing. Viola's smile became fixed. I'll see if her health permits, Your Grace. I have every confidence it will, Countess. His grey eyes held hers steadily. In fact, I would consider it a personal favour if you would ensure she's well enough to attend. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Viola, for all her scheming, was not fool enough to directly refuse a Duke's request. Of course, Your Grace. Family means everything to me. Beatrice's welfare has always been my primary concern. Has it indeed? Arthur's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath the surface. How commendable. Then we are aligned in our interests, for her welfare has become a matter of great importance to me as well. After the Duke had departed, Viola summoned her daughter to her private sitting room, her composure rapidly unravelling. What did you tell him? She demanded the moment the door closed behind Cordelia. During your drive, what exactly did you discuss? Thornfield's history, the local landmarks, Cordelia answered carefully. He seemed quite interested in father's family lineage. Viola's face paled. His family? What specifically did he ask? Nothing unusual, Mother. Just polite conversation. Cordelia maintained her innocent expression. Why are you so concerned? The Duke doesn't extend his visits or take country drives with young ladies for polite conversation, Viola snapped. He's investigating us, investigating me. I can sense it. Perhaps he's simply interested in Beatrice, Cordelia suggested mildly. She is, after all, quite beautiful and accomplished when given the chance to— Enough! Viola paced the room like a caged animal. Tomorrow you will occupy the Duke's attention entirely. Wear your best gown, display every accomplishment, charm him completely. And Beatrice? We'll develop a fever by afternoon. The Duke may insist, but even he cannot argue with a physician's diagnosis. You would go so far as to bring in Dr. Blackwell to lie? Cordelia asked, genuinely shocked. Dr. Blackwell knows which side his bread is buttered on, Viola replied coldly. He'll say whatever I tell him to say. What Viola didn't know was that at that very moment, in a private room at the local inn, the Duke of Wellington was receiving a special messenger from London. The documents the man delivered, copies of the late Earl's will, financial records of Thornfield Manor, and other legal papers, would prove to be the final pieces in a puzzle that Arthur had been assembling since his first meeting with Beatrice. As he read through the papers by lamplight, his expression grew increasingly grave. The Earl's will was explicit. Thornfield Manor and half the estate's income were to pass directly to Lady Beatrice upon her 21st birthday, a date now less than 2 months away. The Countess and Cordelia were to receive the London townhouse and the remaining income, a generous provision but far less than what Viola currently controlled as Beatrice's guardian. So that's the game, Arthur murmured, setting down the documents. It was never about jealousy alone, it was about money and power. By keeping Beatrice isolated and reportedly in poor health, Viola had maintained complete control over the estate. If she could secure a marriage between Cordelia and a wealthy nobleman before Beatrice came of age, Her position would be secure regardless of the change in circumstances. But if Beatrice were to make an advantageous match herself, particularly with someone of sufficient status to question the management of her inheritance, the Duke's jaw tightened as he considered Beatrice's situation. 3 years of systematic exclusion from society had effectively prevented her from meeting eligible gentlemen before her inheritance came due. It was clever, calculated, and utterly despicable. He penned a quick note to his solicitor in London, requesting additional legal counsel on the matter, then turned his attention to the more immediate concern, tomorrow's dinner at Thornfield Manor. If his suspicions were correct, the Countess would go to extraordinary lengths to prevent Beatrice from attending. Meanwhile, at Thornfield, Beatrice was indeed being prepared for another illness. Dr. Blackwell had arrived late in the evening at Viola's summons and was currently in her private sitting room, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "I cannot simply declare the girl ill without examining her, Countess," the physician protested. "It would be unethical and potentially dangerous if she truly needed medical attention in the future." "Don't speak to me of ethics," Viola hissed. "You've been well compensated for your discretion these past years. One more day is all I require." "The situation has changed," Dr. Blackwell insisted, wiping perspiration from his brow. "The Duke of Wellington is involved now. If he suspects—" "He suspects nothing," Viola interrupted. "He's merely bored with country living and amusing himself with my stepdaughter's novelty. Once he returns to London, everything will continue as before. And if he doesn't return to London, the servants talk, Countess. They say he's extended his stay indefinitely." Viola's hand trembled slightly as she poured herself a glass of sherry. "Then we accelerate our plans. I've received correspondence from Lord Harrington expressing interest in Cordelia. A betrothal could be announced within weeks. And Lady Beatrice, what happens when she comes of age and inherits? By then it won't matter. Cordelia will be safely established, and I'll have secured my own position." Viola's eyes hardened. "As for Beatrice, there are sanitariums that provide excellent care for young ladies of delicate constitution. For life, if necessary." Dr. Blackwell paled. "Countess, surely you wouldn't—" "I would do whatever is necessary to protect my daughter's future," Viola stated flatly. "Now, will you provide the medical certification I require for tomorrow, or shall I find another physician who understands his role more clearly?" After a long moment, Dr. Blackwell nodded reluctantly. "Very well, Countess. One final time." Neither of them noticed the slightly ajar door, nor the wide-eyed maid who had been delivering fresh linens and overheard the entire exchange. Eleanor silently retreated down the corridor, her heart pounding with the weight of what she'd discovered. In her chambers, Beatrice sat at her dressing table, carefully returning her mother's pearl combs to their velvet case. The day's events had awakened feelings she'd long suppressed, hope, joy, and something more complex when she thought of the Duke. His promise to return, his determination to include her in tomorrow's dinner. These were dangerous thoughts that could lead only to disappointment. A soft knock interrupted her melancholy reflections. Eleanor entered, her face ashen. "My lady," she whispered urgently, closing the door and checking the connecting rooms to ensure they were alone. "I've just overheard something terrible. The Countess. She means to have you declared ill again tomorrow, but that's not all." As Eleanor relayed the conversation between Viola and Dr. Blackwell, Beatrice's expression shifted from disbelief to horror. "A sanitarium?" she echoed faintly. "She would go that far?" "There's more, my lady. Your father's will, you're to inherit Thornfield and half the estate's income on your 21st birthday. The Countess has been keeping this from you all these years." Beatrice sank back into her chair, memories suddenly realigning in her mind. Her father's quiet assurances before his death that she would always be secure, Viola's increasing hostility afterward, the systematic isolation that began precisely when the mourning period ended. "What am I to do?" she whispered. "If she's willing to fabricate illnesses now, what might she attempt as my birthday approaches?" Eleanor clasped her hands. "You must tell the Duke, my lady. He has the power and influence to protect you." "I barely know him," Beatrice protested. "Why would he involve himself in our family's affairs?" "Begging your pardon, my lady, but I've seen how he looks at you, and he's already suspicious. Why else would he insist on your presence tomorrow?" Eleanor straightened with determination. "If you won't tell him, then I shall. I promised your father on his deathbed that I would look after you, and I'll not stand by while the Countess plots to lock you away. No, Beatrice decided after a moment's thought. I'll speak to him myself, but I'll need your help, and Cordelia's. If I'm to be ill tomorrow, we'll need to find another way for me to communicate with the Duke. As the two women began formulating their plan across the hall, Cordelia was experiencing her own crisis of conscience. The information she'd shared with the Duke during their drive, subtle hints about her mother's financial management, and Beatrice's sudden illnesses whenever suitable gentlemen showed interest, now seemed insufficient in light of her mother's increasingly desperate behavior. The sound of her mother's voice in the corridor sent Cordelia quickly to her desk, where she began composing a note. By the time Viola entered her chambers, the letter was sealed and hidden within the pages of a novel. "Cordelia, dear, we must discuss your approach to the Duke tomorrow," Viola began, settling onto the edge of the bed. "Your blue silk gown, I think. It brings out your eyes wonderfully." "Yes, Mother," Cordelia agreed absently, "though I doubt my attire will make much difference. His Grace seems quite fixed in his interests." "Nonsense. Men of his station are accustomed to having their every whim indulged. Once you engage his attention properly, he'll forget all about your sister's novelty." Viola patted her daughter's hand. "Trust your mother in this. I've navigated society far longer than you have. And if he insists on seeing Beatrice?" "He won't have the opportunity. Dr. Blackwell will attend her in the morning and declare her condition too serious for visitors. Even a duke cannot argue with medical necessity." After her mother had departed, Cordelia retrieved the sealed note and rang for her maid. "Sarah, I need this delivered to the Rose and Crown Inn immediately. For the Duke of Wellington's hands only." The maid's eyes widened. "Miss, if your mother discovers—" "She won't," Cordelia assured her. "Use the kitchen boy, Jamie. He's quick and discreet. Tell him there's a crown in it for his trouble." As the note made its way to the inn, the pieces of a complex chess match were being positioned across the board. By morning, the game would begin in earnest, with Beatrice's future hanging in the balance. Dawn broke clear and promising over Thornfield Manor, though few within its walls greeted the day with optimism. In her chambers, Beatrice received the unwelcome but expected visit from Dr. Blackwell, who performed a cursory examination before declaring her suffering from nervous exhaustion and prescribing complete bed rest. "I'm sorry, my dear," he murmured as he packed away his instruments, his eyes unable to meet hers. "Perhaps in a few days." "Thank you for your concern, Doctor," Beatrice replied evenly, "though I feel perfectly well this morning." "Yes, well, these conditions can be deceptive. Best to be cautious." He hurried from the room, shame evident in the slump of his shoulders. Eleanor entered shortly after with a breakfast tray. "It's as we expected, my lady. The Countess is already informing the servants that you're too ill for visitors, even His Grace." "Then we proceed as planned," Beatrice confirmed. "Has there been any word from Cordelia?" "Miss Cordelia sent this." Eleanor handed over a folded note that had been concealed beneath a napkin on the tray. "She says the Duke received her message last night and has responded accordingly." Beatrice unfolded the note, her eyes scanning her sister's elegant script. "Dearest Bea, all is arranged. The Duke will arrive at precisely 2 o'clock. Mother plans to receive him in the blue drawing room, while I will be practicing the pianoforte in the music room as instructed. Eleanor knows where to position you for our plan to succeed. Have courage. You are not alone in this battle. With love and determination see across the manor, Viola was issuing final instructions to the housekeeper regarding the evening's dinner arrangements when the butler appeared with an unexpected announcement. "Your Ladyship, Mr. William Harrison has arrived from London. He says he represents Harrington and Sons, solicitors at law, and wishes to speak with you on a matter of great urgency regarding the late Earl's estate." Viola frowned. "A solicitor? Now? We're expecting the Duke at 2 o'clock. "The gentleman insists it cannot wait, Your Ladyship. He mentioned something about irregularities in the estate's financial records that require immediate attention." The colour drained from Viola's face. "Show him to the library. I'll attend him shortly." As the butler departed, Viola gripped the back of a chair for support. This unexpected development threatened to derail her carefully orchestrated plans for the Duke's visit. More concerning still was the mention of financial irregularities. Had her creative accounting of Beatrice's inheritance been discovered? By the time 2 o'clock arrived, Viola found herself thoroughly trapped in the library with Mr. Harrison. who had produced an alarming array of documents requiring explanation. Her increasingly desperate attempts to conclude the meeting were met with polite but firm insistence that these matters could not be delayed. "I understand your social obligations, Countess," the solicitor stated calmly, adjusting his spectacles. "However, these discrepancies in Lady Beatrice's trust must be addressed before her 21st birthday. The penalties for misappropriation of awards funds are quite severe." In the entrance hall, the Duke of Wellington was being admitted with all the ceremony befitting his rank. When informed that the Countess was unavoidably detained with legal matters, he expressed perfect understanding. "In that case, I should like to pay my respects to Miss Cordelia," he requested. "I believe she mentioned practicing her music this afternoon?" The butler, who had received specific instructions from both Cordelia and Eleanor, led the Duke toward the music room via a particular corridor, one that passed directly beneath a small balcony connecting the family's private quarters to the main gallery. As they approached this precise location, a soft voice called from above, "Your Grace." Arthur looked up to see Beatrice standing on the balcony, dressed not as an invalid, but in a simple yet elegant day dress, her golden hair arranged with care despite her supposed illness. "Lady Beatrice," he greeted her, genuine pleasure warming his voice, "I was informed you were confined to your bed with nervous exhaustion, yet you appear remarkably composed for one so afflicted." "A miraculous recovery," she replied with a hint of irony, "though I fear my stepmother and Dr. Blackwell would disagree with that assessment." The Duke turned to the butler. "Would you be so kind as to inform Miss Cordelia that I'll join her shortly? Lady Beatrice and I have matters to discuss." Once they were alone, Arthur gestured to the small sitting area beneath the balcony. "Can you come down? Or am I to conduct this conversation with a Juliet on her balcony?" "Alas, my chambers are being watched," Beatrice explained. "This balcony is as far as I dare venture. But we haven't much time. The Countess will eventually extricate herself from her unexpected legal visitor." "Not as unexpected as she believes," Arthur remarked with satisfaction. "Mr. Harrison works for my solicitor and will keep the Countess occupied for precisely as long as we require." Beatrice's eyes widened. "You arranged this?" After receiving Miss Cordelia's note, certain precautions seemed prudent. His expression grew serious. "Beatrice, I know about your inheritance. I know what your stepmother has been doing, and what she plans." "Then you know why I needed to speak with you," Beatrice said softly. "Last night, my maid overheard the Countess discussing plans to place me in a sanitarium once Cordelia is safely betrothed, to prevent me from claiming my inheritance when I turn 21. Arthur's face darkened with anger. "That confirms my worst suspicions. This goes beyond mere social manipulation. It's criminal. What can be done? She is my guardian until my birthday." "A guardian who has systematically isolated you, mismanaged your inheritance, and now plots to have you institutionalized," Arthur pointed out. "No court would uphold her authority once these facts are known." A noise from further down the corridor caught their attention. "Someone's coming," Beatrice whispered urgently. "Listen carefully," Arthur said quickly. "Tomorrow morning at dawn, be ready. Pack only what you can carry discreetly. Your maid, can she be trusted?" "With my life." "Good. Have her meet my carriage at the east gate at first light. I'll have you removed to my aunt's house in London for protection until legal proceedings can transfer your guardianship." "You would do this for me?" Beatrice asked, emotion making her voice unsteady. "I would do far more," Arthur replied, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Beatrice, in the short time I've known you, I've come to—" The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. "Go," Beatrice urged. "We'll speak tomorrow." With a last meaningful glance, Arthur continued down the corridor toward the music room, arriving just as a servant rounded the opposite corner. Beatrice slipped back through the balcony doors to her chambers, her mind reeling with equal parts fear and hope. The remainder of the day passed in a fog of anticipation and dread. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in social tension. The Duke, having finally been released from his legal emergency, received the Duke with effusive apologies and explanations. Arthur accepted them with aristocratic grace that revealed nothing of his true thoughts. "I was most disappointed not to see Lady Beatrice," he commented, as the first course was served. "Dr. Blackwell believes her condition is serious, then?" Nervous exhaustion, Viola explained smoothly. The excitement of recent days has proven too much for her delicate constitution. The doctor insists on complete rest and seclusion. How concerning, Arthur replied. Perhaps I might recommend my own physician. Dr. Hartley has had remarkable success with similar cases among the ladies of my acquaintance. You're too kind, Your Grace, but I wouldn't dream of imposing. Dr. Blackwell has attended our family for years and understands Beatrice's unique medical history. Throughout the meal, Cordelia watched this verbal sparring with barely concealed fascination. The Duke, she noted, revealed nothing of his plans or knowledge, maintaining the perfect facade of a concerned acquaintance. Her mother, meanwhile, grew increasingly uneasy beneath her social veneer, particularly when Arthur casually mentioned his extensive legal connections. By the time the Duke took his leave, promising to call again the following afternoon, Viola was visibly strained. As soon as the front door closed behind him, she ordered a brandy brought to her private sitting room and summoned Dr. Blackwell once more. The situation has become untenable, she informed the physician when he arrived. We must accelerate our plans. Lady Beatrice will experience a severe decline tonight, severe enough to justify immediate removal to a private facility for treatment. Dr. Blackwell blanched. Countess, I cannot possibly certify— You can and you will, Viola interrupted, her voice glacial. Unless you wish your own professional improprieties to become public knowledge. I haven't forgotten your treatment of the baker's daughter last winter, Doctor. The physician's shoulders sagged in defeat. When would you have her moved? Dawn tomorrow. I've already written to the Pines Retreat in Northumberland. They're expecting her arrival within the week. Neither of them was aware that Eleanor, once again positioned outside the door, had heard every word. The maid slipped away silently, her destination not Beatrice's chambers, but Cordelia's, where together they would ensure that the Countess's plans would never come to fruition. As midnight approached, Thornfield Manor grew still. In her chambers, Beatrice carefully packed a small valise with essential items: her mother's miniature portrait, her father's signet ring, and a few cherished books alongside practical necessities. Eleanor had arranged for Jamie, the kitchen boy, to carry the valise to the east gate before dawn, eliminating the risk of Beatrice being seen with luggage. A soft knock announced Cordelia's arrival. The sisters embraced tightly, both aware that their next meeting would occur under very different circumstances. I've written letters, Cordelia whispered, pressing a packet into Beatrice's hands. To Father's old friends, to his solicitor in London, even to our maternal grandfather in Yorkshire. Once you're safely away, I'll send them, ensuring that Mother's actions become known to those who can intervene legally. What will happen to you? Beatrice asked, genuine concern in her voice. She'll be furious when she discovers my absence. Let her rage, Cordelia replied with unexpected steel. I've been complicit in her schemes through my silence for too long. Besides, she added with a mischievous smile, I'm her only remaining pawn in the marriage market. She can hardly lock me away too. I'll send for you as soon as it's safe, Beatrice promised. I know you will. Cordelia squeezed her sister's hands. The Duke, he cares for you, Beatrice. I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. A blush colored Beatrice's cheeks. He's been kind, certainly, but not kind, Cordelia corrected. Kind is rescuing a kitten or helping an elderly person across the street. The Duke is orchestrating an elaborate escape and legal battle against a countess for a young woman he barely knows. That, dear sister, goes far beyond kindness. After Cordelia departed, Beatrice lay fully clothed upon her bed, too anxious for sleep. Her thoughts alternated between fear of discovery and cautious hope for the future, a future that for the first time in 3 years held the promise of freedom and perhaps something more. Outside her window, the night sky gradually lightened toward dawn, and with it, the next chapter of her life prepared to unfold. The first pale light of dawn had barely touched the eastern horizon when Eleanor slipped into Beatrice's chambers, her face tight with urgency. My lady, we must go now, she whispered. The Countess has ordered the carriage prepared for 6 o'clock. They mean to remove you to an asylum in Northumberland today, not next week as originally planned. Beatrice rose immediately, already dressed in her simplest travelling gown. Has Jamie taken the valise? Yes, and the Duke's carriage awaits at the east gate, but we must hurry. The house is already stirring. Together they moved silently through the sleeping manor, using the servants' passages to avoid the main corridors where early rising staff might spot them. A close call with a hallboy carrying coal was averted only by Eleanor's quick thinking and knowledge of a rarely used linen closet where they concealed themselves until he passed. As they neared the side door leading to the east gardens, Eleanor suddenly pulled Beatrice into an alcove. "Doctor." Blackwell's voice drifted from around the corner, accompanied by the Countess's distinctive tones. "You're certain the sedative will keep her compliant for the journey?" Viola was asking. "Yes, Countess. She'll be confused and docile, unable to cause any disruption or make herself understood to strangers." The physician sounded weary, defeated, but I must again express my profound discomfort with this course of action. "Your discomfort is noted, Doctor, and entirely irrelevant. The carriage will be ready in an hour. Prepare the draft and administer it immediately." Their footsteps moved away, heading toward the main staircase that would lead to Beatrice's chambers. "They'll discover I'm gone within minutes," Beatrice whispered, her heart pounding. "Then we have no more time to waste," Eleanor replied, taking her hand firmly. "Come." They slipped through the side door and into the gardens, keeping to the shadows of the hedgerows as they made their way toward the east gate. The morning air was crisp, with a light mist hovering above the dew-drenched grass, providing additional cover for their escape. At the gate, as promised, the Duke's unmarked carriage waited, a trusted groom holding the horses steady. Jamie, the kitchen boy, stood nervously beside it, Beatrice's valise at his feet. "My lady," he whispered with relief as they approached. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "Thank you, Jamie." Beatrice pressed a small token into his hand, her mother's silver thimble, one of the few valuables she'd been able to bring. "For your courage." The boy clutched it tightly. "Godspeed, my lady. Miss Cordelia said to tell you she's ready on her end." Eleanor helped Beatrice into the carriage, then hesitated at the door. "My lady, I should return to your chambers. Replace your pillows with something that might, at a quick glance, appear to be you sleeping. It may buy a few extra minutes." "That's too dangerous," Beatrice protested. "If you're discovered, then I'll have the satisfaction of telling the Countess exactly what I think of her schemes," Eleanor replied with grim humor. "Go, my lady. The Duke awaits you at the coaching inn 3 miles down the road. I'll follow when I can." With a final embrace, Beatrice watched Eleanor disappear back toward the house, marveling at the loyalty her father had inspired in the Thornfield staff, loyalty that had now extended to his daughter in her hour of greatest need. The carriage pulled away, moving slowly at first to minimize noise, then accelerating once they reached the main road. Beatrice sat rigidly, expecting at any moment to hear shouts of pursuit, but the countryside remained peaceful, with only early rising farmers and the occasional milk cart sharing the road. At the coaching inn, as promised, Arthur waited beside his own grander carriage, pacing with barely contained tension. When Beatrice's transport arrived, he moved forward immediately, opening the door himself rather than waiting for the groom. "Thank God," he breathed, helping her down. "When you didn't arrive at the arranged time, I feared the worst. We discovered they planned to move me this morning, not next week," Beatrice explained, as he led her quickly to his waiting carriage. "The Countess will know I'm gone by now. Then we'll waste no time." Arthur handed her into his carriage, following immediately after and signaling to his driver. "My aunt's house in London is prepared for your arrival. You'll be safe there until the legal proceedings are complete." As the carriage lurched forward, Beatrice found herself suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had done. She had fled her home, her guardian, everything familiar, placing her trust and safety in the hands of a man she had known for mere days. Arthur, observing her distress, spoke gently. "Second thoughts, Lady Beatrice?" "Not second thoughts," she answered honestly, "but I confess to feeling adrift. 3 days ago my world was small but known. Now everything is uncertain." "Except for one thing," he replied, his grey eyes holding hers steadily. "You are no longer alone in this fight." The simple statement, delivered with such quiet conviction, steadied her more than any elaborate reassurances could have. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." They travelled in companionable silence for some time, the rhythmic motion of the carriage and the early hour eventually lulling Beatrice into a light doze. She woke with a start when they stopped to change horses at a posting house. Momentarily disoriented, until Arthur's reassuring presence beside her brought reality back into focus. "We've made excellent time," he informed her, as a servant brought refreshments to the carriage. "No sign of pursuit. I expect your stepmother is still searching Thornfield's grounds, assuming you couldn't have gone far without assistance." "Cordelia will keep her occupied as long as possible," Beatrice said, accepting a cup of tea gratefully. "She plans to send letters to Father's old friends and associates once my absence is discovered, letters detailing the Countess's treatment of me these past years." Arthur nodded approvingly. "Your sister has shown remarkable courage. I admit I misjudged her initially, assuming she was cut from the same cloth as her mother. Cordelia has always been kind to me, though perhaps not brave enough to openly defy the Countess until now." Beatrice's expression softened with affection for her sister. She was as much a victim of her mother's ambitions as I was, merely in a different way. As they resumed their journey, Arthur broached the subject that had been uppermost in his mind since discovering the truth about Beatrice's situation. "Once we reach London, my solicitors will petition the courts for an emergency removal of your guardianship from the Countess," he explained. "Given the evidence of financial mismanagement and the extreme measures she was prepared to take regarding your person, I'm confident the petition will succeed." "And until my birthday?" Beatrice asked, the practical question revealing her quick mind. "I'll need a new guardian for those remaining weeks. My aunt, Lady Catherine Spencer, has agreed to serve in that capacity. She's a formidable woman of impeccable reputation who sits on the boards of several charitable institutions for the welfare of young women." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "No one would dare question her fitness as a guardian, not even the Countess." "You've thought of everything," Beatrice marveled. "Not quite everything," Arthur admitted, his expression growing more serious. "There is another matter we must discuss, one of considerable delicacy." The change in his tone caused Beatrice's heart to quicken inexplicably. "Yes?" "Your reputation," he said simply. "While your escape was necessary, society will not look kindly on a young, unmarried woman traveling alone with a bachelor, regardless of the circumstances. By the time we reach London, rumors will already be circulating." "I hadn't considered that," Beatrice acknowledged, her brow furrowing. "Though given my non-existent social position these past years, perhaps there isn't much reputation to salvage." "On the contrary," Arthur countered, "as the Earl of Ashworth's daughter and the heiress to a considerable fortune, your standing in society should be assured. I will not be the instrument of its destruction." "What do you suggest, then?" Arthur took a deep breath, as if preparing himself for a momentous step. "Under ordinary circumstances, I would never be so presumptuous, but our situation is far from ordinary." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, yet somehow electrifying. "Lady Beatrice Ashworth, I am asking for your permission to pay my addresses to you, with the understanding that a formal betrothal would protect your reputation, while simultaneously placing you beyond your stepmother's reach permanently." Beatrice stared at him, momentarily speechless. Of all possible solutions, this was the one she had not anticipated. "Your Grace, Arthur," he corrected softly. "After everything, I believe we've earned the right to first names, don't you?" "Arthur," she amended, the name feeling strangely right on her lips. "You cannot possibly be serious. We've known each other less than a week, and yet in that time I've learned more about your character than I have about women I've known for years." His expression was open, honest. "Your intelligence, your grace under pressure, your loyalty to those who care for you, these qualities are rare and precious. I find myself thinking of you constantly, wondering what observations you might make about a book I'm reading, or how you might enjoy the gardens at my estate." His words, so different from the practiced compliments she'd overheard gentlemen offer at balls before her social exile, touched something deep within her. Still, caution prevailed. "You're offering marriage to protect me," she stated, trying to understand his motivation. "It's incredibly generous, but—" "No," Arthur interrupted firmly. "I'm offering courtship, the chance for us to know each other properly, as you deserve. The betrothal would be understood as a future promise, giving us time to determine if we suit. If, after a reasonable period, you find your feelings do not align with mine, I would release you from any obligation, though the protection of my name would remain." "And your feelings?" Beatrice asked quietly, hardly daring to meet his eyes. "You speak of mine, but what of yours?" Arthur's gaze never wavered. I believe I am falling in love with you, Beatrice Ashworth. Not with your fortune or your connections, but with you, the woman who reads Shakespeare in gardens and stands firm against injustice with dignity rather than bitterness. I cannot promise that love will grow perfectly between us, but I can promise to cherish and respect you always, whether as husband or friend." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Beatrice felt tears threatening. 3 years of isolation, of being treated as invisible, and now this man, this duke, saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. "I would be honored to receive your addresses," she said softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I believe my feelings may be developing in a similar direction." The smile that transformed Arthur's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. He raised her hand to his lips, the gesture formal, yet filled with unspoken promise. "Then I shall speak with Lady Catherine immediately upon our arrival. As your temporary guardian, she must give her blessing, though I suspect she'll be more than amenable." The remainder of the journey passed in a curious mixture of comfortable conversation and charged silences, both of them acutely aware that their relationship had fundamentally shifted. By the time London's outskirts appeared on the horizon, Beatrice felt as though she had known Arthur Wellesley all her life, while simultaneously finding him more intriguing with each passing hour. Lady Catherine Spencer's townhouse in Belgrave Square was everything a ducal relations residence should be, elegant, imposing, and exquisitely maintained. The lady herself proved equally impressive, a tall, silver-haired woman of 60, whose piercing blue eyes seemed capable of seeing through any pretense. "So this is the young lady who has finally captured my nephew's interest," she declared, after Arthur had made the introductions and briefly explained the situation. "Well, you certainly have more substance than the empty-headed debutantes usually paraded before him. That's promising." "Aunt Catherine," Arthur warned, though his tone was affectionate. "Oh, don't Aunt Catherine me, Arthur. The girl has been through an ordeal. She deserves honesty, not social platitudes." Lady Catherine turned her formidable gaze back to Beatrice. "You'll stay here, of course. The blue suite is prepared, and I've engaged a suitable lady's maid to replace the one you left behind. Your companion, Eleanor, was it, will be welcomed when she arrives." "You're very kind, Lady Catherine," Beatrice responded, already warming to the older woman's straightforward manner. "Not kind, practical. Rescuing young women from nefarious guardians requires organization, not sentimentality." Her eyes twinkled unexpectedly. "Though I admit to a certain satisfaction in thwarting the schemes of someone like your stepmother. Deplorable woman, by all accounts." Over the next 2 days, Beatrice settled into her new temporary home while Arthur's solicitors worked tirelessly on the legal proceedings. Eleanor arrived as promised, having left Thornfield amid the chaos following the discovery of Beatrice's disappearance. The Countess was beside herself, Eleanor reported with ill-concealed satisfaction, raging through the house, accusing everyone of conspiracy. "When Miss Cordelia suggested that perhaps treating you more kindly might have prevented your flight, I thought her ladyship might actually strike her." "Cordelia said that?" Beatrice asked, surprised and proud of her sister's newfound courage. "She did indeed, and when the letters she sent reached Lord Pembroke and Sir William Darcy, your father's closest friends, they arrived at Thornfield within hours, demanding explanations." Eleanor's eyes gleamed with the delicious scandal of it all. "The Countess tried to claim you were mentally unstable and had wandered off in a delusional state, but Miss Cordelia produced Dr. Blackwell's written confession about being coerced into falsifying your medical reports." "Dr. Blackwell confessed?" This was an unexpected development. "Apparently his conscience finally overcame his fear," Eleanor explained. "After you escaped, Miss Cordelia confronted him privately and reminded him of his oath as a physician. He broke down completely, wrote out a full account of how the Countess had manipulated him, and then left Thornfield immediately for his brother's home in Scotland." "And now?" Beatrice asked, concerned for her sister's welfare in the aftermath of such dramatic events. "Miss Cordelia has been removed to Lord Pembroke's estate for her own protection. The Countess is effectively under house arrest at Thornfield while investigators examine the estate's financial records." Eleanor smiled with satisfaction. "The tide has turned decisively, my lady." True to Eleanor's report, the legal proceedings moved with surprising swiftness. Arthur's influence, combined with Dr. Blackwell's written testimony and the financial evidence uncovered by the investigators, resulted in the courts removing Viola as Beatrice's guardian within a week. Lady Catherine was appointed in her place for the brief remaining period until Beatrice's 21st birthday. Throughout this tumultuous time, Arthur called at Lady Catherine's townhouse daily, sometimes to update Beatrice on legal developments, but increasingly simply to spend time in her company. Their conversations ranged from literature to philosophy, from music to the natural sciences, each discovery of shared interests or respectful disagreements deepening the connection between them. Lady Catherine observed their growing attachment with approval, though she maintained a proper chaperone's vigilance during their interactions. "He's a changed man when he's with you," she commented to Beatrice one afternoon as they worked on correspondence in the morning room. "I've known Arthur since he was a boy. Brilliant but reserved, always keeping people at a distance. You've somehow breached those walls." "He did the same for me," Beatrice replied softly. "I had built my own defenses after years of my stepmother's cruelty. Arthur saw through them immediately." "Then you're well matched," the older woman declared with satisfaction, "though I insist on a proper courtship period. Hasty marriages, even between well-suited individuals, can lead to unnecessary difficulties." "Of course," Beatrice agreed, though secretly she found herself dreaming of a future as Arthur's Duchess with increasing frequency. 2 weeks after her arrival in London, another unexpected visitor was announced. Cordelia, accompanied by Lord Pembroke, arrived at Lady Catherine's townhouse in a flurry of emotion and relief. The sisters embraced tearfully, both talking at once until Lady Catherine intervened with amused exasperation. "Ladies, perhaps one at a time. I believe tea in the drawing-room would provide a more suitable environment for your reunion." Once settled with tea and privacy, Lord Pembroke having departed to meet with Arthur, Cordelia shared the full story of what had transpired at Thornfield after Beatrice's escape. "Mother initially believed you'd simply hidden somewhere on the grounds," she explained. "By the time she realized you were truly gone, I'd already dispatched my letters to Father's friends." Lord Pembroke arrived first, followed by Sir William Darcy and Judge Harrington, all demanding explanations. "You were remarkably brave," Beatrice said admiringly. Cordelia shook her head. "No, merely doing what I should have done years ago. When Mother realized she was cornered, she became desperate. She tried to claim you had become mentally unstable, that you'd been behaving erratically and posed a danger to yourself. Hence Dr. Blackwell's confession was so vital," Beatrice observed. "Precisely. Once he provided his statement, Mother's house of cards collapsed entirely. The investigators discovered she'd been systematically diverting funds from your inheritance to her personal accounts, and even falsifying reports to the trustees." Cordelia's expression grew somber. "She's facing criminal charges, Beatrice. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. The list seems to grow daily." Beatrice set down her teacup, conflicting emotions washing over her. Despite everything, she took no pleasure in Viola's downfall. What will happen to her? That remains uncertain. Lord Pembroke believes she may avoid imprisonment due to her social standing, but her reputation is irrevocably destroyed, and she'll likely be required to make full financial restitution. "And you? How are you coping with all this?" Beatrice reached for her sister's hand, concerned about the impact of their mother's disgrace. To her surprise, Cordelia smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile she hadn't seen in years. "I feel free, Beatrice. For the first time, I'm not being molded into someone else's vision or used as a pawn in someone else's game. Lord and Lady Pembroke have invited me to stay with them indefinitely, and Lady Pembroke has already begun introducing me to society on my own merits, not as the Countess's daughter." "I'm so glad," Beatrice said sincerely. "You deserve every happiness, Cordelia. As do you." Cordelia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Speaking of which, Lord Pembroke mentioned that a certain duke has been in constant attendance here. Is there something you wish to tell me?" Beatrice blushed, unable to contain her smile. "Arthur has been remarkable. He's asked permission to court me formally with Lady Catherine's blessing." "Court you? From what I've observed, he's halfway to the altar already." Cordelia laughed delightedly. "The way he looks at you, Beatrice. I've never seen such devotion." "It's still very new," Beatrice cautioned, though her heart leapt at her sister's words. "We're taking things slowly, getting to know one another properly." "Very sensible," Cordelia agreed, though her tone suggested she thought it entirely unnecessary. though I predict you'll be a duchess before the year is out." That evening, a small dinner party was held at Lady Catherine's townhouse to celebrate the sisters' reunion and the successful resolution of the legal proceedings. Arthur, Lord Pembroke, and several other close friends gathered in an atmosphere of warm camaraderie. After dinner, Arthur managed to draw Beatrice aside into the small conservatory adjoining the drawing room. The space was filled with exotic plants and illuminated by strategically placed lanterns, creating an intimate oasis of greenery and golden light. "You seem happy tonight," he observed, his eyes tracing her features as if committing them to memory. "I am," she confirmed. Seeing Cordelia, knowing she's well and happy, it's lifted a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. "And the news about your stepmother? That doesn't trouble you?" Beatrice considered the question thoughtfully. "I take no joy in her downfall, if that's what you're asking. What she did was wrong, undeniably so, but I hope in time she might find some measure of peace and redemption." Arthur's expression softened with admiration. "Your capacity for forgiveness astounds me. Most people in your position would harbor considerable bitterness." "Bitterness changes nothing except the heart that carries it," Beatrice replied simply. "My father taught me that. Besides," she added with a faint smile, "I find I have too much happiness in my present circumstances to waste energy on past injustices." "About those present circumstances," Arthur began, his tone shifting to something more serious. "There's something I wish to discuss with you." A flutter of anticipation rose in Beatrice's chest. "Yes?" "Your 21st birthday is next week. Once it arrives, you'll be legally independent, mistress of your own fortune and destiny." He moved slightly closer, his gaze intent. "I want you to know that nothing changes for me when that day comes. My feelings, my intentions, they remain constant." "I never thought otherwise," Beatrice assured him. "Nevertheless, it needs saying." Arthur took both her hands in his touch warm and steady. "When I first suggested paying my addresses to you, circumstances were complicated by your need for protection. I want no ambiguity now. I court you not out of duty or chivalry, but because you've become essential to my happiness." The simple declaration, delivered with such quiet certainty, brought tears to Beatrice's eyes. "And you to mine," she whispered. Arthur's smile in response was like sunrise breaking across his usually composed features. For a moment it seemed he might say more, perhaps even propose there and then, but the sound of approaching footsteps reminded them of their surroundings. Lady Catherine appeared at the conservatory entrance, her expression a masterful blend of propriety and amusement. "While I approve of your courtship, Arthur, perhaps the conservatory during a dinner party is not the most discreet location for private conversations." "My apologies, Aunt," Arthur replied, though his smile remained undimmed. "We were just discussing Beatrice's upcoming birthday celebrations." "Indeed?" Lady Catherine arched a silver eyebrow skeptically. "Well, continue that discussion in the drawing room, if you please. Lord Pembroke is asking for you." As they rejoined the party, Beatrice felt a contentment she had not known since before her father's death. Surrounded by people who valued her for herself, with her sister safe and her future bright with possibility, the dark years at Thornfield seemed increasingly distant, a closed chapter in a story that was now taking a far happier turn. The week leading up to Beatrice's 21st birthday passed in a whirlwind of activity. Lady Catherine, declaring that the occasion demanded proper recognition, arranged a small but elegant birthday ball to formally reintroduce Beatrice to society. Invitations were sent to carefully selected guests, people of influence and integrity, who would welcome the Earl of Ashworth's daughter without prejudice or excessive curiosity about her unusual circumstances. The preparations absorbed much of Beatrice's time, yet Arthur still found opportunities to visit daily, often bringing small, thoughtful gifts, a rare volume of poetry she had mentioned admiring, a pressed flower from his estate's conservatory, or simply news that might interest her about mutual acquaintances or cultural events. On the morning of her birthday, Beatrice woke to find her bedchamber filled with fresh roses, her favorite flower, and a small package on her dressing table. Inside was an exquisite pearl pendant suspended from a delicate gold chain, accompanied by a note in Arthur's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Beatrice, these pearls belong to my mother, who received them from my father on her 21st birthday. I can think of no worthier successor to wear them than you, whose quiet strength and inner beauty echo hers in so many ways. Happy birthday, my love. Today marks not only your legal independence, but the beginning of what I hope will be our shared future. With deepest affection, Arthur Beatrice's hands trembled slightly as she fastened the necklace around her throat, the pearls cool against her skin, but quickly warming, a tangible symbol of belonging, of continuity, of promise. The day unfolded in a pleasant succession of birthday rituals. Breakfast with Lady Catherine and Cordelia, who had moved temporarily to the townhouse for the celebrations, receiving callers who came to pay their respects, and final preparations for the evening's ball. When Arthur arrived that evening, resplendent in formal attire, Beatrice felt her breath catch at the sight of him. Though she had always found him handsome, tonight there was something different in his bearing, a contained energy, an air of anticipation that mirrored her own emotions. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his eyes taking in her appearance with undisguised admiration. Lady Catherine had insisted on ordering a new gown for the occasion, a creation of ivory silk embroidered with delicate gold thread and seed pearls that complemented Arthur's gift perfectly. Beatrice's golden hair was arranged in an elegant style, adorned with a single white rose, the overall effect both sophisticated and youthfully fresh. "Thank you," she replied, finding herself uncharacteristically shy under his gaze. "And thank you for the necklace. It's the most precious gift I've ever received." "It suits you," he observed, his expression softening, though its beauty pales in comparison to its wearer. The arrival of the first guests prevented further private conversation, but throughout the evening, Beatrice was acutely aware of Arthur's presence across the ballroom, his eyes finding hers frequently amid the swirl of dancing and socializing. The ball proved a resounding success. Lady Catherine's careful selection of guests ensured Beatrice was welcomed warmly into society without the uncomfortable scrutiny she had feared. Several of her father's old friends attended, expressing delight at seeing the Earl's daughter flourishing after her difficult years. "Your father would be so proud," Lord Pembroke told her, during a quiet moment between dances. "Not just of your beauty or accomplishments, but of your character, the way you faced adversity with dignity and emerged stronger." "Thank you," Beatrice said, deeply moved. "That means more than I can express." As the evening progressed, Arthur claimed his dance with the birthday honoree, a waltz that had only recently become acceptable in the more progressive circles of society. The intimacy of the dance, with his hand at her waist and their faces closer than propriety usually allowed, created a private world amid the crowded ballroom. "Are you enjoying your birthday celebration?" he asked, guiding her expertly through the turns. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she admitted. "A few months ago I was hidden away at Thornfield, convinced I would never experience an evening like this. And now? Now I feel as though I'm living in a dream, one from which I hope never to wake." Something in her voice, the depth of emotion perhaps, caused Arthur's hand to tighten slightly at her waist. "There's something I wish to ask you," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Not here, with so many eyes upon us. Would you meet me in the garden in half an hour? Lady Catherine has installed new lanterns along the paths, entirely proper for guests to admire." Beatrice's heart quickened. "Yes," she agreed simply. The 30 minutes that followed seemed interminable as Beatrice fulfilled her duties as the evening's honoree, accepting congratulations, engaging in polite conversation, and pretending she wasn't counting the minutes until she could slip away to the garden. Finally, during a lively country dance that occupied most of the guests, Beatrice made her way discreetly to the French doors leading to the garden terrace. As Arthur had mentioned, the paths were illuminated with delicate paper lanterns, casting a warm golden glow across Lady Catherine's meticulously maintained formal gardens. She found him waiting beside the central fountain, his tall figure silhouetted against the cascading water. As she approached, he turned, and the expression on his face made her heart skip a beat. "You came," he said, as though he had harbored some doubt. "Of course." She moved to stand beside him, the sound of water and distant music creating a sense of intimate seclusion despite their proximity to the house. Arthur took her hands in his gaze steady and intent. "Beatrice, when I first saw you in the gardens at Thornfield, reading Shakespeare with such absorption, I was intrigued. When I spoke with you and discovered your mind and spirit, I was captivated, and when I learned of your circumstances and witnessed your courage in facing them, I was humbled." He paused, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "These past weeks of coming to know you properly have only confirmed what I suspected from the beginning, that you are the woman I've been waiting for all my life, though I didn't know it until I found you." Releasing one of her hands, Arthur reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Beatrice's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring, a perfect sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum. "Lady Beatrice Ashworth," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife? I promise to cherish, respect, and love you for all the days of our lives, to be your partner in every sense, and to ensure that the shadows of your past are thoroughly eclipsed by the brightness of our future together." Tears of joy blurred Beatrice's vision as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, this remarkable man who had rescued her not just from external circumstances, but from the isolation that had threatened to become her permanent state. "Yes," she whispered, her voice strengthening as she repeated, "Yes, Arthur, I will marry you." With a smile that transformed his usually reserved features, Arthur slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire catching the lantern light as if illuminated from within. "It matches your eyes," he murmured, raising her hand to his lips and pressing a kiss to her fingers just above the ring. The gesture, so tender and reverent, broke the last of Beatrice's restraint. She stepped closer, her free hand coming to rest against his chest. "I love you," she said softly, the words she had held back now flowing freely. "I think I began loving you from our first conversation in the garden, when you saw me, truly saw me, after years of being invisible." Arthur's arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer still. "My dearest, loveliest Beatrice," he murmured, his face now mere inches from hers. "May I kiss you? I've been wanting to since that moment in the garden." Her answer was to lift her face to his, and as their lips met in a first tender kiss, Beatrice felt the last pieces of her world fall perfectly into place. This was where she belonged, not hidden away at Thornfield, not even restored to her rightful social position, but here in the arms of a man who loved her for exactly who she was. The kiss remained proper. They were, after all, in Lady Catherine's garden during a social gathering, but its sweetness and promise sealed their commitment as surely as the ring now adorning Beatrice's finger. When they eventually returned to the ballroom hand in hand, their radiant expressions made a formal announcement, almost unnecessary. Lady Catherine, spotting the ring immediately, gave a satisfied nod before summoning the orchestra to silence for Arthur's official announcement. The guest responded with genuine enthusiasm, Lord Pembroke raising his glass in a heartfelt toast to the couple's health and happiness. Cordelia embraced her sister with tears of joy, whispering, "I told you so," in her ear, with sisterly satisfaction. As the celebration continued around them, Arthur kept Beatrice close by his side, as if reluctant to be separated from her even for a moment. "Happy?" he asked softly during a brief lull in the well-wishes surrounding them. Beatrice looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a joy that went beyond mere happiness, a profound contentment, a sense of homecoming, of rightness. "Completely," she answered. "It feels as though everything, even the difficult years, was leading to this moment, this life we'll build together." Arthur's hand tightened around hers, the pressure conveying understanding, agreement, and promise. "Then let us begin," he said simply. And so, under the approving gaze of friends both old and new, Beatrice Ashworth, once hidden away from society, now embraced by it and, more importantly, by the man she loved, stepped forward into her future, leaving the shadows of Thornfield Manor behind forever. 1 year later, the Duchess of Wellington stood in the newly redesigned gardens of Wellesley House, the Duke's ancestral estate. Spring sunshine warmed her face as she surveyed the changes she had implemented since becoming mistress of the vast property, changes that blended her own love of natural, informal beauty with the estate's grand traditions. "Admiring your handiwork?" Arthur's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms encircling her waist. "Our handiwork," she corrected, leaning back against him contentedly. I recall a certain duke insisting on personally selecting the varieties of roses for the eastern terrace. A duke who knows when to defer to his duchess's superior taste in most matters, he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. The gardens have never looked more beautiful, like their mistress. Beatrice turned in his arms to face him, her expression softly radiant. Flatterer, you've become quite the silver-tongued courtier since our marriage. Not flattery when it's the simple truth. His gaze was tender as it traced her features. Marriage to you has made me happier than I ever imagined possible, Beatrice. I find new reasons to be grateful for you every day. As I do for you, she replied, reaching up to touch his cheek affectionately. Their first year of marriage had indeed been one of profound happiness and growth for both of them. Beatrice had blossomed as the Duchess of Wellington, bringing warmth and thoughtfulness to a role that might have intimidated a less resilient woman. Arthur, meanwhile, had revealed depths of tenderness and humour that had surprised even those who had known him longest. Together, they had established a household known for its genuine hospitality, intellectual vibrancy, and compassionate engagement with the communities surrounding their estates. Lady Catherine, a frequent visitor, often remarked that they had created precisely the kind of partnership her late brother, Arthur's father, had hoped his son would find. "Shall we go in?" Arthur suggested, offering his arm. "Cordelia and Edward will be arriving soon, and I know you're eager to hear their news from Italy." Beatrice smiled at the mention of her sister and her husband. Cordelia had married Lord Edward Fitzwilliam, a kind and scholarly second son, 6 months earlier. Their shared passion for art and history had promptly led them to an extended honeymoon tour of Italy's cultural treasures. "I can hardly wait to see her," Beatrice agreed as they walked toward the house. "And I have my own news to share." Arthur stopped, turning to her with sudden intensity. "News?" Beatrice's smile widened, her eyes shining with joyful anticipation. "Dr. Hartley confirmed it this morning. By winter, Wellesley House will have a new heir, or heiress." For a moment, Arthur seemed frozen in place, his expression cycling through shock, wonder, and finally incandescent joy. Without warning, he lifted Beatrice off her feet in an exuberant embrace, propriety forgotten in the privacy of their gardens. "Truly?" he asked when he finally set her down, his hands still cradling her face as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "We're to have a child." "Truly," she confirmed, laughing at his uncharacteristic display of exuberance. "In approximately 6 months, according to the doctor." Arthur's hand moved to rest gently against her still flat stomach, his touch reverent. "A family of our own," he murmured. "Beatrice, my love, you've made me the happiest of men." As they continued toward the house, arm in arm and hearts full of shared joy, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a hidden flower at Thornfield Manor to the beloved wife of a duke, soon to be mother to their child. The path had not been easy or direct, but every step, even the painful ones, had led to this moment of perfect contentment. Inside Wellesley House, her home, their home, the future awaited, bright with promise and secure in love. The end. Dear listener, when the final words of our story fade into silence, what remains is not just memory, but possibility. Beatrice found her liberation at 21, but perhaps the true freedom comes to us much later, in these precious years you now inhabit. Society rarely speaks this truth, that the 7th, 8th, and 9th decades of life can be the most authentic of all. You've shed the costumes you once wore to please others. The exhausting dance of impression management has finally ended. Like a tree that no longer needs to grow taller, you now expand in wisdom and deepen your roots. You know something the young cannot. That heartbreak doesn't end you. That fear can be faced. That laughter matters more than perfection. The Countess Violas of this world, those who judge by narrow standards of utility or appearance, have lost their power over you. What magnificent liberation! When sleep eludes you tonight, consider this revolutionary thought. You have earned the right to prioritize joy, not the fleeting pleasures chased in youth, but the profound contentment of a life fully acknowledged. The Duke recognized Beatrice's worth instantly because he had lived long enough to value substance over spectacle. You stand in this same place of discernment. Your body may whisper its complaints, yes, but it has carried you through storms and sunshine, deserving gratitude rather than criticism. The lines on your face aren't flaws, They're a map of a journey courageously undertaken, a testament to smiles offered and tears honestly shed. The world speaks constantly of beginnings, first steps, first loves, first homes. But there is unique beauty in culmination, in the gathering together of a lifetime's understanding. You hold this now, this precious harvest. What will you do with such bounty? Who might be nourished by what you alone can share? Tonight, as you drift toward dreams, know this. Your presence in this world is not a footnote, but a vital chapter still being written. The quality of attention you bring, the patience you've cultivated, the forgiveness you've learned to offer. These are rare medicines in a hurried world. Rest well, not because your work is finished, but because tomorrow offers new opportunities to be gloriously, uncompromisingly yourself, the self it has taken decades to fully become. What freedom awaits in the morning light? With profound respect for the journey that has brought you here. Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. If Beatrice's journey moved your heart, if her courage, resilience, and the Duke's quiet devotion brought you comfort or inspiration, we invite you to support our channel in a meaningful way. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and leave a comment telling us what this story meant to you. Your words truly encourage us, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. Your support from the bottom of our hearts keeps us motivated to continue bringing you more stories filled with love, redemption, and powerful emotional turns. At the end of this video, you'll find a suggestion for another unforgettable story from our channel. Click it and continue discovering more heartfelt journeys just like this one. With all our gratitude, Legends of the Fall Team.